This is Ringler Radio, where you get all the latest news and information about structured settlements from Ringler Associates, the first name in structured settlements, helping injured people and their families since 1975. Ringler Radio is made possible in part by Allstate, American General, John Hancock, Liberty Mutual, MetLife, Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, Pacific Life, and Prudential. Now join Ringler Radio host Larry Cohen.
Well, hello and welcome to Ringler Radio, everyone. I'm Larry Cohen, the head of Ringler Associates Northeast Operations, and we're certainly glad you could join us again today. Well, in past Ringler shows, we've done them from the lawyer's or broker's perspective. We've discussed how structured settlements can be of great value to the individual claimant. Today on Ringler Radio, we're going to take a look at structured settlements from an insurance company's perspective and discuss the benefits of structures and the value of educating clients about the whole area of structured settlements. Well, joining me today as my co-host is my Ringler colleague and friend from California, Mike Z. Mike began his career with Ringler in the Newport Beach office back in 1996, and he's been the managing associate for the Costa Mesa office of Ringler from 2007 right down to the present. So with that, Mike, welcome to Ringler Radio. Thanks for being my co-host.
Good morning, Larry. Good to be here.
Great, Mike. And we'll be joined today in this discussion by our special guest, Caryn Siebert, Vice President and Head of Claims for Knight Insurance Group in Los Angeles, California. Caryn has been a contributor and leader in the insurance industry for many years, and Knight Insurance Group is the provider of capital support and underwriting capability for a niche insurance program business. The Knight Insurance Group focuses on well-managed niche program business on an admitted and not admitted basis. So with that, welcome, Caryn. Thanks for joining us here on Ringler Radio.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be here today.
Terrific. Well, Caryn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, as well as something about the Knight Insurance Group?
Well, you mentioned in your opening comment that prior interviews have been from the vantage point of lawyers and brokers, and I'm actually an attorney by trade. Mm-hmm. Several years were spent at a large insurance company. I've been a general counsel and then a claims director at Courageous Insurance, part of General Electric. And I was also the director of claims for Safeco before I became the CEO for Carl Warren & Company, a third-party claims administrator. And now I'm excited to be part of Knight Insurance Group and heading up our claims operations. Knight is part of the Hankey Group, which is based in Los Angeles, and we do business in 48 states. As you mentioned, we own and operate a licensed carrier, an excess and surplus lines carrier, a reinsurer, and an agency and management company so that we can focus on niche specialty programs, things like construction, auto, transportation are in our growth plans in the future.
Caryn, given your background, you better than most understand structured settlements, but can you give me a little feel for what you believe the value of structured settlements are to insurance companies like Knight?
Well, oftentimes, Mike, when an insurance company is attempting to resolve a claim, you try to be reasonable with the claimant as to what it would take to assist them, oftentimes following a pretty tragic situation, to get their life back into order. And so they're not accustomed to having $250,000 or $1 million in one lump sum. So one of the things here at Knight, we like to use the structure because it'll assure that the plaintiff will have money for the term that it was intended, instead of just giving them one lump sum and then it doesn't get utilized the way we intended, and then they run out of money down the road.
You know, it's interesting, Caryn. I've had lawyers tell me when their clients have taken cash, sometimes even against their own the lawyer's objections of taking cash, that the people tend to spend the money more quickly than they ever thought they would, and they somehow feel that the lawyer, and I'm sure we can apply that to an insurance settlement, they think that somehow the lawyer didn't get them enough money or the insurance company didn't treat them right because they've spent the money that was there. So I think what you're saying is by providing a structure and having that security of that money being there, takes away some of that bad feeling that sometimes comes up when the money's gone.
Well, and I think you're right, Larry. I think one of the benefits of structure is that in this day and age, people just think about cash. They think about it as like hitting the jackpot. If you use a structure and you explain it the right way, you should be able to actually translate it into, okay, how much would it cost to pay off your home? How much would it cost to pay off your car loans? And instead of them thinking about getting a lump sum of money, you think about the things you could take off of their mind during this difficult situation and focus them on what they really need to move forward. And that's a really big benefit of using a structure.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think the peace of mind aspect, the benefit of that peace of mind, I think is sometimes missed by a lot of people when they're thinking about structures. The concept, we all know it, Caryn, the concept of knowing you're going to get a check on a certain day every month is quite comforting rather than have to worry about how you're going to put everything together for your future.
That's very true. We're all about needs. Caryn, how's the relationship work between partners like Knight Insurance and Ringler Associates?
Well, like most relationships, it comes down to communication and planning and listening. And what we try to do is encourage the claims professionals here to identify files pretty early on that have the potential to involve, I'd say probably $100,000 or more, whether it's injuries or emotional distress. And then we have to make sure that we hear whether the claimant is going to bring in a life care plan expert, because the sooner we hear that is going to happen, the sooner we should bring Ringler involved and get them working with the plaintiff attorney and our defense attorney.
No question. Well, why don't you walk us through the process, Caryn, during the development of a structured settlement as you're dealing with lawyers and claimants? How do Ringler Associates and your company, the Knight Insurance Group folks, how do they interact and to come up with the right plan?
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, in the life of the claim, you recognize that there's an opportunity to change that discussion from instant cash to longer-term sustainability, stability, and relieving the burdens of that person's, ongoing life. So, first of all, we talk about the fact that, Ringler only gets paid if the structure is accepted.
Right.
And it comes from the annuity company. So it's really no additional cost to either the plaintiff attorney or the defense attorney or to the claimant. And we try to actually encourage counsel to press a little bit more aggressively and creatively to convince the parties involved that a structure is going to be fruitful. And to get creative with it. I mean, there's even situations where the attorney fees can be structured. So the ideal situation is when you identify that $100,000 or those catastrophic injuries to roundtable your file or do a large loss review and bring structured settlements up earlier in the discussion than waiting for a demand and then having to work backwards from there.
And let me ask you, Caryn, in that process among those various parties, how do you feel your own defense counsel interacts in that process? I mean, obviously the defense counsel is looking to defend the case, has things on their mind. Are they typically on board with you in terms of trying to push forward a structured settlement option as trying to resolve the case?
Well, I think there's always room for more creativity and more initiative. Defense counsel, obviously, their focus is making sure they understand the arguments and how the damages flow. So I think it's more on the claim professional to make sure that defense counsel understands our philosophy on getting structured settlements and that the structured broker, again, which is part of the service that's provided, can actually save us legal expenses because they will be involved in doing calculations and running through different scenarios. And I'm not saying that the defense attorneys don't like that, but the defense attorneys really do focus more on getting resolution to the file. That's why it's great to have your structured broker, especially if you go into a mediation, right there in the mediation table if it's permitted.
A real team effort.
That's interesting you say that, Caryn, because I've always felt that, counsel's there to be your advocate and we're there to be the more reasoned side with claims to help you get it done. That's a good point. Can you explain any rules in play that insurance carriers have when working with structured settlements?
Well, interestingly enough, one of the major rules, so to speak, is security. So, the first question that usually comes up is, well, why should I trust you with my money? So we make sure to use A-rated life insurance companies with a good reputation. And we also make sure to work with Ringler on the language that's in the annuity so that it's a full release, and the security that's involved there is very important to plaintiff and to their attorney. So it's more philosophy. The other thing is that when the annuity company remits payment to Ringler, we take an arm's length approach. So we're not involved with that at all. And that's important under the rules for NASTA, that we keep an arm's length arrangement.
Terrific. Well, our audience is pretty savvy about structures, Caryn, who've been doing a lot of these shows for a lot of years. But it's never a bad idea to remind them about some of the basics. How do the payments to structured settlement claimants work from your perspective? How does it happen that they become the benefit that they really are to these folks?
Well, Larry, I think the major issue that we talked about with our claim professionals when we train them is the fact that instead of this lump sum, you can set your reserve, and when you make the payment to the annuity company, they're the ones who are then making the payment on a quarterly basis, an annual basis, a monthly basis. Maybe some of it is earmarked for a specific use basis. And then they're guaranteed by the life company that, it's protected. On top of it, they're getting interest. So the interest rates, although they're pretty modest right now, the investment income is also tax-free. So for us, there's an ease of just making the one payment to the annuity company and then allowing them to structure it in the format they wish, and then the annuity company taking care of all that administrative work.
Very well said. Very well said.
Karen, then are companies able to set aside a certain percentage of total payout, some sort of a reserve fund?
Well, what we do is we go ahead and we set up a reserve just like any other file. We set up an allocated loss adjustment expense for the attorneys, the court reporters, the experts, and then we set up our indemnity loss fund. And when we set that up, if we set up, let's say, $250,000, it's because we know that down the road it may take more money, but by using a structured settlement, you're getting the future value of current cash. And so rather than setting up a higher reserve, we'll note the file that we're setting this up in anticipation of using, hopefully, a structure. If it doesn't end up structuring out, then we go ahead and adjust the loss reserve at the end to get that claimant their full amount of money.
Terrific. Well, let's take a quick break right now and be back in a minute right here on Ringler Radio with my co-host Mike Z and our special guest Caryn Siebert. We'll be right back.
This is Ringler Radio from Ringler Associates, the leader in the structured settlements profession nationwide. Did you know that Ringler is involved in a third of all structured settlement cases in the country? Ringler Associates works with all the parties in a lawsuit settlement to find the best possible financial solution for the people involved. There's a Ringler Associate in all the major cities of the U.S. No one has more experience than a Ringler Associate. Check out our new website at www.ringlerassociates.com for the best information for claimants, legal professionals, and claims personnel, and to find the Ringler Associate nearest you. When it's your interest at stake in a lawsuit settlement, you want only the best financial plan. You can count on Ringler Associates to structure a customized plan that meets the needs of you and your family for the future. Visit ringlerassociates.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Ringler Radio. Glad you could join us. I'm joined today by my co-host Mike Z from Ringler's Costa Mesa, California office, and our special guest Caryn Siebert, Vice President, Head of Claims for Knight Insurance Group in Los Angeles. Well, Caryn, can you give us a recent example of the Knight Insurance Group's involvement in structuring a settlement? You know, some kind of a case that you worked on where you felt that the structure really had an impact.
The one that comes to mind, Larry, is when recently we actually hit an impasse with a plaintiff attorney who was actually having a challenge with his own client. And so we contacted Ringler, and we explained the situation that there's a life care plan expert who's been retained, and they've penciled out over $1 million in damages, but that given the person's background, we really didn't think that was warranted. So with the use of Ringler, really working through with the plaintiff attorney and trying to help him control his client, so to speak, we were able to get them to come back down a little bit closer to reality. And then again, putting up the reserve that we have, knowing that the structure will allow that money to get stretched out a little further, really helps with what I would call whiteboarding the future value of those current dollars. The other thing that Ringler helps with is explaining what kind of a jury verdict that plaintiff would have to get in order to get the amount that we have offered, and how much longer it would take to go through that entire trial and the experience, and then still not be sure if they would get that kind of a verdict to be rendered to give the claimant the money that they want, as opposed to our offer.
Caryn, what type of cases do you think work best from a carrier's perspective?
From the carrier perspective, and actually, when I was a TPA as well, I'm a big proponent of using structures in cases that involve minors and middle-aged individuals with serious injuries. If we can demonstrate how those funds can be used, as we said a little bit earlier, to pay off college debt, for example, or to set aside the money for a future marriage, to pay off their home, to purchase new vehicles, to take care of the medical bills, the physical therapy, really get them thinking about all the things that'll come off of their plate. That helps out with minors and with people who are in their middle age, because it helps them with their quality of life, and it's a win-win situation. Too often, when you're dealing with an older claimant, they're more worried about having the money now, going on vacation now, enjoying what years they have left in their life. And the pressure by the family is such that they say, just take your money now. You don't know what's going to happen in the future.
That's interesting you say that. We've all had cases with older folks, and you find sometimes you get claimants who, because they're getting a monthly Social Security check and they're into that mentality of bill paying and moving along, sometimes when you can show them what a monthly payment on a structure piggybacked with their Social Security payment on a guaranteed basis, so that if God forbid something happens, it'll pass on to their family. Sometimes it's meaningful to them. So, I think you're right. I think minors and maybe the middle age are the more prevalent groups, but I don't give up on those old folks either. It's interesting.
Well, and that's an interesting point. If they're used to getting those monthly payments, they may be accustomed to it.
Yeah.
And the family can always, if you put in the right language, cash out the annuity at a discounted price and get that cash if and when the parent passes away.
Interesting. Well, Caryn, how do carriers and TPAs educate their large deductible and self-insured clients about structures? We know that insurance companies, claim departments, the claim personnel typically understand them, but when you're dealing with risk managers, let's say at a big corporation or a company with an SIR, how do you get them in the mix?
Well, when I was at Carr Warren as a third-party claims administrator and now here at Knight Insurance, one of the things we try to do is roundtable our bigger cases. So we sit down with the risk manager, or we sit down with the insured, and explain the severity of the claim and the different options. We usually call it a plan of action to move this claim further towards resolution. And when you work through that process, we explain the fact that using a structure, as we talked about, can alleviate all these concerns. And that since we're going to put up a reserve anyway, how can we stretch those dollars a little bit further? And our goal is obviously to reduce their total cost of risk. So a structured settlement is part of that reduction of the total cost of risk and a mitigation strategy, so to speak. But I think the best way to do it is once they see it works, they really become the biggest advocates. And next thing you know, you hear them asking, well, did we get a structure involved in this one or not? Which is great.
Terrific.
So then, Caryn, you generally offer recommendations towards structuring cases to clients and await their directives to fund the settlement with cash versus structure?
Right. So what we do is we'll talk about the possibility of using a structure, and we'll be more proactive with regard to funding the structured settlement, setting aside the reserve, and being hopefully cautiously optimistic. But when we set a reserve, we set it for the most probable outcome. So it's a two-way street, and we always want the opinion of counsel. It's always interesting when sometimes the plaintiff attorney actually suggests a structured settlement, because that even helps us more with regard to persuading our own client and insured to use a structured settlement in the situation.
Well, you know, Caryn, as we wrap up here, it's obvious to me that Knight Insurance, and I know there are other companies as well, who really believe in structured settlements. And because they believe so strongly in how they help not only the claimants, but also the whole process of trying to get cases resolved, that they're trying to spread the word about structures out there. How do you folks at Knight and maybe other insurance companies, how do you help get the word out that structures are maybe a way to go that maybe some people still are unaware of?
Well, there's a few ways to get the word out about structures. I mean, obviously, we're here today on Ringler Radio, and you guys have done a fabulous job over the years with Ringler Radio and educating us. But the other formats available, for example, at the Combined Claims Conference, I know that Ringler has a presence there and usually do presentations on structures. Coming out to the offices, since it's very difficult for claim professionals to get away from the office for a few days or for a conference, coming in here and doing training maybe after you work through a structure and letting people sit in and understand it. Meeting over at the CLM, the Claims Litigation Management Alliance. I think Ringler is still the sponsor of the Claim Professional of the Year Awards, and are always available at that conference to help train us on structured settlements. So I think it's a two-way street. I mean, we have to be out there proactively pursuing education, but you guys have been a great resource for us in the industry, and I thank you for that. I think it's really important we keep that training going, especially as we have new claim professionals coming into this industry.
Well, those are very encouraging words. I know for folks like Mike and myself and the whole industry, it's terrific that you have such a positive perspective about structures and the way in which you're spreading the word out there as well. So, Caryn, with that, let's wrap this up. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, get in touch with you, how's the best way to do that?
Best way to do that is probably through email. I'm at csiebert@knightcompany.com. Or they, of course, can find me through LinkedIn.
Terrific. And Mike, how about yourself?
Yeah, I can be reached at my email address, mzea@ringlerassociates.com, or my office phone is 877-899-1114.
And all of you out there, you can always go to ringlerassociates.com, the Ringler website, which is a terrific resource for helping to spread the word, as we say, about structured settlements. And, of course, you can reach any Ringler associate around the country through that website. It's a terrific vehicle, a terrific resource. I would recommend it. And, of course, you can also find all the Ringler Radio shows on that website. We've done quite a few of them, and I think a lot of them have been educational, as Caryn has spoken about. And again, you can also reach Ringler Radio. You can also reach all the Ringler Radio shows on ringlerradio.com, in addition to ringlerassociates.com. But you can also find them on LegalTalkNetwork.com, or you can go to iTunes. And if you go to iTunes, you can download each particular show, listen at your leisure while you're walking around the park there in L.A. You can have those earphones on and be listening to Ringler Radio instead of Bruno Mars. I think that's probably a better idea. Well, with that, Caryn, I'd like to thank you again for joining us today. You've been a terrific guest.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And Mike, again, great co-host. Thanks again for that.
Always glad to be here. Caryn, you're delightful. You get it.
You know what, Mike? I'm glad you said that because I think we're going to nominate Caryn as, Claims Exec of the Year. I think she deserves it. I really do.
I think so, too.
You guys are too kind.
All right. With that, I'll say goodbye. And for all of you listeners out there, hey, go have a great day. Bye-bye.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. Thanks for listening to Ringler Radio. With over 1 million listeners, Ringler Associates, the first name in structured settlements. Visit ringlerassociates.com today.